So we are officially in Skyward Sword HD release week, as it is Monday, July 12th at the time of filming this video, and the game will be out on the 16th this Friday. So with that, of course, Nintendo waits to reveal some major gameplay changes until the last second, which we now have in a trailer. So I want to briefly cover that today, and then I also want to cover some bad news when it comes to games coming to the Nintendo Switch, especially from third parties or games that are going to be supported on all platforms. And while the Switch is really showing its age, and we have to talk about some of the expectations we're going to have when it comes to these games going forward. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, we're talking about a couple different things today. The first thing I do want to talk about is Skyward Sword HD, as we are officially in release week, and while I am very excited to pick this game up on day one and start my journey through this for the second time, as I did play it originally on the Wii but was not very happy with that version of the game, it does appear that Nintendo has not announced one of the major features that is included in this game that apparently you can use throughout the entire game, and it hasn't been talked about or mentioned at all up to this point. And that is even considering that we have a quality of life improvement trailer released from Nintendo, and they still did not mention this feature that is now apparently there from the start and available throughout the entire game, and that is a free motion camera. As if you remember playing on the original, or if you look at any gameplay clips, or if you just look at the Wii controller itself, you would know that you had one analog, and that does lock you into only being able to shift your camera through a either first person view that you have to go into and then look around, or you have to use your Z targeting function, where you're basically changing Link's direction based off which way you want to target an enemy. And it is a way you can change the camera, but it's very, not smooth, and it's going to be kind of cut up in frames, and you can see kind of how janky it looks when you do it that way, and it just doesn't feel like a smooth experience when you need to reorient yourself a different direction. So in this trailer, where Nintendo's basically talking about how they've cut down the intro of the game, which is another big thing that I mean super kudos to them for recognizing the fan feedback around how long the tutorial of this game actually was, and how overbearing the NPCs were, with just the over explanation of everything and how it works. I think Nintendo has definitely taken that feedback in, and it sounds like they're cutting down pretty much the entire beginning portion of the game when it comes to a tutorial perspective, because for me as a hardcore Zelda fan, I've almost never felt like I had to force myself to get into a game more than I did with my first run through in Skyward Sword HD. And a large part of that was that I felt like before I could even go explore or go to any dungeons or go to the land below, I was spending more than a couple hours just getting through the real basic text from the NPCs that I couldn't even skip past at all. So I'm very happy to see that, obviously they're making those adjustments there, but I am surprised that they included in this trailer some motion of the actual camera going around Link, and everybody realized, wait a minute, you couldn't do that in the original game, and Nintendo has not announced it at all. Now, there is a interesting talking point when it comes to how this is going to be done, because obviously if you're using the Joy-Cons for the motion control that the game does still support, that makes sense, because you have two analog sticks, and one's mapped for your shield and one's mapped for your sword, and it's not going to be hard to expect how you would move the camera around with one of those analog sticks. Being the right stick would probably be obviously where they would map that to, and you would just easily be able to rotate the camera around Link, as we see in the trailer here. But what happens if you're playing this game in button controls? And I am definitely going to be doing that myself on my first run through. So I want to know, how am I going to be able to change the camera, as my sword is what is supposed to be mapped to that right analog stick. So the way that would make sense, and it would be easy to attack this, would be just to press a certain button and use the right analog stick to rotate the camera around. And I don't think that would be too hard to do at all. But there is obviously, the unannounced factor of maybe the reason that Nintendo did not announce this earlier or did not focus on it could be for the simple fact that it is not supported when you're doing button only controls. And I certainly hope that that's not the case, but we will not know until we start to see reviews of the game come out, and I'm sure that those will break right at release, if not a little bit before release. And depending on where you're at in the world, you might be able to play it just a little bit sooner than other players. But I will be very curious to see if in button mode controls, if we can still move this camera around freely like it does show that you can do in at least motion controls. At least that's all assumptions right now, but that's what it seems like from this trailer. So I want to know from you guys in the comments down below if you're planning on picking up Skyward Sword HD, if you're going to do motion controls or button controls first time around, and if this free camera upgrade is a really big deal to you like it is to me. So please share all your thoughts with me on that in the comments down below. And then the next thing I want to talk about is really something that is just very disappointing to me overall when it comes to a console like the Nintendo Switch that has now been on the shelf for over a full 4 years. And we obviously had the recent announcement that was very underwhelming for a lot of people who don't play their console in handheld for the Switch OLED model. And that the reason it's underwhelming is quite obvious, and it's because we're going up $50 in price point. We're getting a much better, display and kickstand, but there is really no docked features that are supported in this OLED model that were not already there in the base model. And we got a trailer from Nintendo today that had a very big missing feature of a game that is coming to all platforms, and that is Sonic Colors. And on Nintendo Switch, this game will only be able to run in 30 frames per second, as they did remove the addition of 60 frames per second that is in the trailer for all of the other consoles. And it's just one of those things that really stood out to me when I watched this trailer today, and when I read the different articles online stating that this game would be locked to a 30 frames per second on the Switch. And it creates this big problem, because if you are a hardcore Nintendo fan such as myself, but maybe you do own other consoles, like I own a PlayStation 5, I do love to play on the PlayStation 5, but I can't take that with me if I am going out and about. And if I had it in a perfect world, a game like Sonic, I really want to purchase on the Nintendo Switch, but then getting this news that on all of the other consoles you can run it at 60 frames per second, and you're not going to be able to do that on the Switch even in docked mode, it is very disappointing to me, because as somebody who wants to pick this up ideally on the Nintendo Switch first, I now have a clear performance gap in something like just a Sonic Remastered. Remember, this game came out originally on the Wii, and it is being upgraded to HD and having all of these new enhancements included. And while I'm not like the biggest Sonic fan out there, I do intend to purchase this game and enjoy a playthrough of it. And now you have this big missing feature that will not be there on the Switch. And that's not to say that obviously this hasn't happened on the Switch over and over again, but I think this one hits especially close to home, considering we just had Nintendo go out and announce a brand new model that is not going to launch until October of this year. And we are already seeing games that will be around the corner have a huge missing feature like an extra 30 frames per second. And if you guys don't know how big of a difference that is, go turn on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I'm sure you own it because that game has sold like ridiculously well. Go into single player mode and play it in docked, and that will be running at 60 frames per second. Then go to VS mode, or Grand Prix with 2 players, and go in and actually try to play it then, and you will see a noticeable difference when it comes to the smoothness of the overall gameplay and how well it looks. And I do think that something like a Sonic game where you're moving fast and that's how they immerse you into the world, having a 30 frame drop off on the Switch version will be a noticeable difference and a noticeable downgrade. And I hate to see things like that come to the Switch and the Switch fan base. Whereas, I don't know about you guys, but I would have even happily paid $400 if Nintendo asked it, if they gave me something like a beefed up chipset in the console itself where I could run games at maybe 4K with being upscaled through DLSS technology, which does not sound like it's out of the question for Nintendo to do. And then they gave me something like, something that just can run games better overall, as there has obviously been a lot of discussion. Even major games like Hyrule Warriors have actual frame rate issues when you get enough enemies on the screen, or God forbid you play in multiplayer mode. They actually have noticeable dips in the frame rate, and this is going to continue to happen more and more. And I personally don't want to go through Breath of the Wild 2, which is a game that I'm so excited to play, with noticeable frame rates. You may even remember from frame rate dips rather. You may even remember that in the original Breath of the Wild, when you go to Korok Forest to actually pull the Master Sword, that is actually a terrible experience because it just stuttered a lot, and it's like we actually have people running this game on PC and using the better hardware to play Breath of the Wild in the way that it could be played on a more powerful Switch, but Nintendo is choosing to stick with the same chipset that they've had since 2017. And so while I am still planning on getting a Switch OLED model, it is one of those things for me that I'm like, know what, Nintendo really should have put a better chip in this revision, and if they're not doing it now, they really need to for the next revision, because I do think that, you know, according to all the reports, Nintendo's about halfway through the Switch's life cycle, and we're going to need to see some kind of upgrade before the true next gen Switch, because that would mean that we're about 4 years out until the end of the Switch. And if you guys can imagine how much better games are going to get over the next 4 years, especially on other platforms, if we are still stuck with a 2017 Tegra chip, and really I think it was 2015 is when that chip was originally developed, we are going to be left out of the conversation when it comes to high fidelity graphical style games and running at decent or acceptable frame rates. And so, you know, obviously this is kind of for me a bigger deal than maybe it is for everybody else, but that's where I want to hear from you guys on. I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all, so please leave in the comments down below what you think about games running, you know, at 30 frames per second on the Switch, such as a remaster like Sonic Colors whenever it was originally released on the Wii to begin with, and then it's running way better on the competition's platform. So I want to know from you if it's a big deal to you, if you're planning on getting a Switch OLED model and you know, it doesn't really upset you that the fact that we're not able to run games at 60 frames per second that can do that on other platforms, or if you're kind of in the same boat as me where you're ready to see Nintendo actually buckle down and do some kind of chip upgrade in a revision for the Switch. So please share all your thoughts with me in the comments down below, and then also hop over to the community tab on the channel where I will be asking you guys how you're planning on playing through Skyward Sword HD the first time, and whether or not you're planning on doing it with motion controls or button controls. So please do all those things before you leave the video today. Thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. I do truly appreciate you all sticking around until the end. I do at this point in the video want to invite you all one more time to join Sunbro Nation if you haven't done so already. Do so by subscribing below, hit the like button on your way out if you enjoyed it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. That's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you all have a great day. Sunbro Nation, out.